Good morning, everybody, and thank you for logging into the Blue Springs Chamber of Commerce Virtual Power Hour. This morning, it looks like we just have Trish from the Chamber here. I am Laura Sipes. I'm a Blue Springs independent HR consultant and a Chamber member and also a volunteer for these Power Hour sessions. Joining us this morning is Khali, Benney, and DeeAnn Myers from Datasource Background Screening Services. Khali and DeeAnn will be discussing the complexity of the background screening process, specifically in regards to the state of Missouri. Khali joined Datasource 4 years ago, working her way up to becoming the company's first sales director. She's pioneered her way into the healthcare industry, acquiring preferred vendor status at one of the largest in-home healthcare franchises. She works to simplify procedures and processes for effective and efficient company operations. And DeeAnn is a servant leader and entrepreneur and has owned a mortgage company, a title company, a document imaging company, and a small business consulting firm, very busy. She is now leading a team of experts in the background screening industry. So as far as starting off with introductions, if everybody I see a whole bunch of people, but I can't tell in what order it'll go. But if you want to start, maybe Scott, if you want to start us off with just a short introduction, name, company, and what your business focus is.
Sure, my name is Scott Fullerton. I own a CPA firm here in Blue Springs, Fullerton CPAs.
Kelly Logan, and I'm the VP of HR for Job One.
Who else?
Tina Wyatt, I own Hometown News.
I'll go. I'm Kim Hankins. I'm the Director of Recruiting at Job One.
Hi, I'm Rachel Worster. I'm a Senior Employment Specialist with Job One. I work out of the Grandview location.
Introduce themselves. Okay, DeeAnn, I think we're ready for you.
Okay, so I was kind of born and raised in Blue Springs, went to high school in the 80s, and have 3 kids now in Blue Springs, so I love it. Today we wanted to talk about background screening and give you kind of some basics, some overhead, kind of a high-level view, and then dig into some of the Missouri with our expert, Khali. I'm very thrilled to be with Datasource. We are a Blue Springs company that has been in business for a little over 25 years and really serving the community and nationwide and international searches as well. Right now, in the midst of all of this crisis, I have to kind of just fall back to the quote that when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. And then I'll also say, way to go you in learning something new. I think whenever there is a time of crisis or we're all being squeezed, we do have a choice. We can either just sit there, be squeezed until we kind of rot away or sour, or we can change and turn into something even better than we were before. Today we're going to talk about 3 reasons why you should run a background check, who regulates the industry, who can run a background check, talk specifically about Missouri background checks, the different types of searches, especially that you should run in Missouri, how to get started, and then a question and answer session. So one thing that we really like to do is serve our community, and we love questions and we love to help. So if you do have any questions, if they're specific, general, however you would like to ask, just type it in that chat box at any time, and then I think we're going to answer them kind of as we go through. And then as so many of us have all been homeschooling, I have a quiz in here to make it kind of fun, a little educational, and then I do have some prizes. So I do have some Datasource headphones that I would love to mail out to you guys just by participating. So if you're ready, we're going to go ahead and jump right into our trivia quiz, question number 1. What happened in the 80s and caused the steep spike in prison population? If you can kind of see there, it went from the 200 range all the way into multiple of millions. A is Iran-Contra affair. B is the war on drugs and the Anti-Abuse Act of 1986. Was it C, Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986, or the formalized concept of the World Wide Web in 1989? And if you would go ahead and just chat or type your answers in the chat of what you think the answer is, A, B, C, or D. What happened in the 1980s and caused this steep spike? So let me know when you guys put your answers in. Right.
It looks like Kim was first with answer B.
Oh, nice. Way to go, Kim. Answer number 1 is the war on drugs and the Anti-Abuse Act of 1986. And especially since the Blue Springs Chamber, this whole year is really celebrating the 80s. And I have to say I am an 80s girl, although I hate that now because it really gives away my age. But if you were born in the 80s or know anything about the 80s, every single day after school, we saw these commercials that said, this is your brain on drugs. And that indeed did change the prison population from that day forward, basically, with the Reagans. Now, you may already know this, but I wanted to tell you who regulates background checks in that industry. And really it comes from the FTC and the CFPB. So the Federal Trade Commission wanted to put something in place, and it passed it in 1970, really for addressing the fairness, accuracy, and the privacy. That is why, the privacy especially is why the FTC is so involved. And then I think around 2006, 2007, the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, got involved, and they actually do a lot of the regulation as well. So we like to get our news and our information direct from the source. Now, wanted to also talk about who can run a background check. Obviously, employers searching for employees, and I think probably about 90% of all employees or employers now do some type of screening, but also nonprofits, churches, organizations, anyone that's searching for volunteers, also landlords that are searching for tenants. And then there's also another section that is very law directed. And we're starting to see a lot more of this, especially today with guns. You know, guns would be one that would be law directed. In order to buy a gun, you would have to have a background check ran. Medical marijuana, as that's coming out, that is also another law driven. A lot of the states are putting things in place for their schools to have background screening, and a lot of youth programs are under the law directed. 3 things that you must have in order to run a background check. That's permissible purpose, which really is the warranted reason to be conducting a background check. The second thing is that authorization and consent, that they do you have something in writing signed by them stating that they are giving consent for you to run the background check. And then the identifying information. Sometimes I know that the HR personnel, sometimes you are entering this, sometimes it's coming from your system, your onboarding system. And we also have some fantastic tools that you can actually send them a link that has all of the disclosures, and they complete it themselves. And we do find that with some of that identifying information, it is, you know, obviously nice when it's accurate with so many common names and things like that.
DeeAnn,
all right. Yes.
Forward. Quick question: as it applies to volunteers and non-for-profits, what is the thoughts on? Do you run a background check on the same person every year? You know, because you have your volunteers coming in, or is it, you know, you have somebody that commits the crime, in 2020, is it not going to show up until 2021 on their background check in those kind of scenarios? Is it every 5 years? How does that work?
Khali's actually going to talk about reruns and the importance of that. So I think that is a great question. I think I would consider her more the expert than I am, but I think that is yes, a great idea to definitely do that. Somebody, I mean, not the beauty of this, the strangeness of this is that you could, anyone could commit a crime today or tomorrow or the next day. So yeah, that the reruns is what we call those, is very, very important. So, but that's a great question. And like I said, Khali's going to cover a little bit of that. All right. So trivia question number 2, is everybody ready? Because, I want everybody to get these cool headphones. All right. So the number of Americans with criminal records today is larger than the entire population in 1900. Holding hands, which I know we can't do right now, but holding hands, if all Americans with arrest records would circle the earth, how many times? And go ahead and enter your answer. 1 time around the earth, 2 times around the earth, 3 times around the earth, or 4 times around the earth. Did everybody submit it?
No.
Okay, so holding hands, Americans with arrest records could circle the earth 3 times. And this is, just kind of one piece of information that it still is kind of mind-blowing, I think, sometimes. I love the way this breaks out large groups of people, and this, military veterans, there's, what is that, 20 million. NCAA attendance, households with a dog, married couples, Obama voters in 2012, all of those are less than persons with arrest records. In fact, we actually, in our country, in America, persons with a bachelor degree and a person with arrest records are probably very similar, very comparable in size. The only thing that we Americans have more than criminals are obese Americans and homeowners. So just kind of a fun trivia fact. So the answer was 3 times around the earth. And that's, like I said, is kind of shocking when you think about that. Next, I wanted to talk about really the top 3 whys that you should run a background check. The number 1 reason is risk. I think it was Ben Franklin that said an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And I really would pose this to business owners in asking, let me ask you this, with your business or your organization, what do you have to lose? I hate to say it, but murder is a crime, and probably one of the most committed crimes. The risk of not doing a background check, could it cost your life? Could it cost a crime of a sexual assault, theft, fraud? The list could literally go on, and some of the statistics, can be very, very staggering. I think it's good to ask your company, what could your business withstand if we were to have a situation like that. And really, we feel like mitigating your risk by knowing. I think knowledge is very, very powerful. And I think that you can also save money on your insurance, getting bonded, on not having some of those losses. And as I'll quote my pastor, Pastor Phil, I always say, just don't let temptation meet opportunity. If you know that somebody is a criminal, don't pair them up with that temptation and opportunity. Don't let those two mix. So on risk, really, kind of sit down and think about your business from a number standpoint. And I've always been a very analytical and have a numbers mindset. the risk far outweighs the cost of doing a background check. And background screening is very inexpensive for what it can save you, and certainly the knowledge and the power that it can give you. And in thinking that possibly up to 1 in 3 people could have a criminal record, I think that the risk is probably much greater than most people would want to really admit. Number 2 is responsibility. Businesses, nonprofits, churches, organizations, everyone, in my opinion, has a responsibility to the community and to whom they serve. If I want to take my children to church and drop them off, I am going to assume that you have already done the necessary things to protect yourselves and to protect my child and to protect the community. So especially when it comes to children, handicapped, and the elderly. Our group, and one of the reasons that attracted me to Datasource a couple of years ago, is just this team of experts and this group of people that literally are on a mission to protect and serve those who can't protect themselves, especially the children and the elderly, and with the in-home health and the handicapped. We do a tremendous amount with a lot of nonprofit organizations that just need that commitment to, in that responsibility to your community. Winston Churchill once said, "The price of greatness is responsibility," and I really believe that. I also think that aligning the applicant's skills with their criminal background. I'm not saying, and we don't believe that, criminals should go to work. We need everyone to really work, but it's really just aligning them in that responsible position and taking that responsibility seriously. And the third reason that you should run a background check is for your reputation. It takes years to build a great reputation, and unfortunately, one act to tarnish it. So hate to see people lose everything that they've spent their entire life building because of one person. And usually it's believing the good in that one person and not really, thinking that something would happen. It breaks our hearts. We do a lot with churches and camps and Christian organizations. And I think it was about a month ago that it was in the news that a woman was running all of the financials for a business or for the church. They never ran a background check on her, and she ended up over a 3 or 4 year period stealing $400 million from that church. And of course, they were just kind of blindsided, and how could this happen? And again, it's not that we don't trust anyone, but trust and verify. Do your diligence. If I kind of look at it this way, if the FBI ran 4.9 million searches for gun owners last month, do you think the crime will rise? It's very possible that that it certainly could. So just safeguard your reputation, and I hate to see anybody lose what they've spent an entire life building and helping small businesses. This is something that for $25 you could have not had this problem. So I think that's the 3 reasons why you should run background checks. And I'll go ahead and hand it over to Khali next to kind of go through kind of more of Missouri.
Hi everyone, I'm Khali. So I'm going to talk to you guys about searches in general and then specific to Missouri. So there are 4 basic checks. They're definitely the most widely used, paired with the motor vehicle report, which those are pretty common and standard across every state. So I'm going to talk about our enhanced nationwide search, county of residence searches, state repositories, and then federal searches. and they're all very different in what they do. So our enhanced nationwide search, the nationwide search is definitely the most widely used across the board. Most people do run nationwide searches. So it does access online databases that states will report to. And you can see here, I mean, it does a plethora of things. And I'm not going to read through every single one, but it is a fastest level 1 search, which a lot of people do have that question. It does search every single state's sex offender registry list. We do it at the state level because they update faster than the nationwide level. So it's more real-time results. Now, we do have questions about if it's matched against the National Sex Offender Registry, which it is. Whenever there's hits, we do always search that as well. We just start there at the state. It'll pull all records from any criminal activity from all counties that release. Now, the thing with the nationwide search is county to county, state to state, everyone does things differently. So it's really just going to vary depending on where you are, on how well the nationwide is going to cover your area. It will also pull all known aliases, and a great feature to the nationwide is that it cross-references those. So any aliases they've ever went by, it cross-references with all of the databases, and then it also will cross-reference with all of the sex offender registry lists. So it does give you some great coverage. And then it also does the Social Security validation. So if there's anything amiss with the social they provided, if it's tied to another name, if there's a death decree, anything like that, it will flag that for you guys. Okay, DeeAnn, next, sorry. Okay, so with that said, the nationwide is a great baseline search to run. Now, there's a lot of confusion out there as I talk to more and more people. When you hear enhanced nationwide search, you just assume, or a lot of people do, that you're getting full coverage in the country, and it's just simply not true. As I will always recommend starting with the nationwide search, I will never recommend to run it alone, ever. It does cover a lot, but it does miss a lot as well. So there's 50 states out there, and 28 states have counties that don't release. And unfortunately, that's forever changing. Counties can change to their discretion at any time. So it's not information that's going to be consistent. So when running a nationwide, it's important to know that it's not going to cover every county in the United States. It's not going to give you that full coverage that so many people assume it does. Running the nationwide on its own is just poor practice. Next. Sorry, DeeAnn. We should have had a signal or something. I can't hear you.
Sorry, I am muted. Okay.
So the next search that I'm going to talk about is the county search. So breaking it down to the county level, you can do it multiple different ways. I will always recommend at the very minimal to do an enhanced nationwide with the county of residence, because at least you're going to be checking where they currently live. Now, the county searches, you can do multi-county packages, or you can just pull the county that they're currently living in. For a while there, we would say that statistically speaking, the average person has lived in 2 counties in the past 7 years, which is really kind of the time frame we're being drawn down to with basing employment decisions. So that number has changed. I don't even know what the accurate number is anymore, because more and more people are becoming more transient. I mean, more people are traveling, and it's not a bad thing. It just makes the background screening part a little bit more difficult. So when you do the county criminal search, it will pull all felony and misdemeanors directly from the courthouse. Now, every courthouse works differently. So there's some courthouses, and it tends to be in the bigger cities, where our researchers can go in and pull the records themselves. Now, the smaller courthouses, the smaller counties, those are normally clerk assisted. So that'll vary we have to wait on that clerk to get those records for us. But typically it's 24 to 72 hours with a county criminal to be returned. In Missouri, we were experiencing some extended turnaround times just with everything with COVID-19 and courthouses closing, but it does seem that we're back to normal. And in Missouri, it's normally within 48 hours that you'll get those county searches back. And while we're on that, I'm going to touch base that Missouri is a non-release state as well. So we don't report very well into the database, which means the nationwide is not going to really cover Missouri. So if any of you guys are only running nationwides, please heed my words. You need to run something more than that. So there's over 3,000 counties in the United States. Missouri has 114 and then one independent city, which I actually just learned that. I did not know St. Louis was an independent city. So DeeAnn taught me that yesterday. So there's a lot of counties out there. And you can have an address history. You can always pull an address history so you can see where they've lived. So it's just a good practice to run the counties they've lived in. Now we're going to touch base on state repositories, which, okay, so Jackson County was closed, I think, was it May 5th, DeeAnn, that they're opening back up?
I believe so. I think that's...
And it's just opening back up to the public. So our county searches here in Missouri, like I said, we were having extended turnaround times, but everything it seems to be going back to normal now. And Kansas, since, you know, we're bordering state right there, we're not having any issues with Kansas either. So, okay, so state repositories. Now, state repositories sometimes are great and sometimes are not. Again, every single state works differently because if they all work the same, it would just be too easy for us. California, Nevada, and Wyoming don't even offer state repositories. Then we have states like Colorado and North Carolina where their state repositories are very, very cheap on the scale of the cost with the states. And then they're fantastic searches. And Colorado's is even an instant search. You'll get that back the same day. Now, there's good things and bad things. So what the state repository does is it will check every single county in the state for you for one flat rate. So instead of checking per county, if you know someone has lived in one state their whole life or at least 7 years, doing a state repository could benefit you. But it is per name alias. So if you have someone who applied as Trish, I just read Trish, so yes, I'm using your name, as let's say Trish Smith, but she has a record as Patricia, and you run Trish, it's not going to find that for you. So there are downsides to it. So that the strengths is that it could cover, I mean, it will cover the whole state, but again, it's down to the name aliases. So when you're dealing with someone who doesn't have a name that can be shortened, or even if it's Dan and Daniel, sometimes that can still pull because it is very similar in nature. And then with middle name variations, I don't recommend entering those with state repositories. If they need it as an additional identifier, submit it to them. But if you include it and it's there and they don't have it on the record, it could prevent that record from pulling. So unfortunately, the background screening industry was not made to make our lives easier at all. It's very complex, and with how different it is in every state, it can get quite confusing. So you definitely want to know what you normally deal with, where your people are normally coming from, how your state and your area works, so you know that you're doing your due diligence and doing the best search you possibly can. Now I'll say in Missouri, I will never recommend running a state repository. And the reason for that is our state repository is $24.50, so it's on the higher end. The turnaround time is 2 weeks, and I've worked in this industry long enough to know that nobody wants to wait 2 weeks to know if they can hire someone. It's just not feasible. And then in Missouri, I do recommend a multi-county package. We have bundle packages, and I'm sure every company will, where you can get multi-counties in a package, but even a la carte, paying full cost for a county, you can get 3 and it still be $2 cheaper than the state repository in Missouri. So I recommend running counties. Okay, so the last search I'm going to talk about is the federal search. Now, the federal search versus the county state repository enhanced nationwide, it's going to pull records that are prosecuted at the federal level, whereas all of the other searches are prosecuted at the state level. So most states have 2 to 3 federal districts, and we offer this search per district, state, or nationwide, but I'm going to let you guys know nationwide is definitely the way to go when running federal searches. It's not that much more, and you get way more coverage. So some examples of what would fall in that federal level: mail fraud, hijacking cars or aircrafts, kidnapping, bank robbery, child pornography, credit card fraud, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I will say that more times than not, and this is not all the time, so don't run with that and come back and yell at me. More times than not, when someone has a federal prosecution on their record, they have one at the state level as well. So I'm not saying federals are a bad idea to run, ever. I would never say that. What I am saying is that normally you would see something at that state level that might even have you add on a federal just to check into it further, versus just federals. There's not a lot of hits on federal searches, but they are good to run because, I mean, you can have someone who has never done anything in their life and decided to go walk into a bank and rob it. So you never know who you're dealing with. So that's the federal, and the only shortcoming with federal is that it doesn't show anything prosecuted at the state level, which is obvious because it's the federal search. Okay, DeeAnn. Okay, so I know, Trish, you had asked about annual reruns. Annual reruns are very important. I will always recommend them, always. So I have a lot of nonprofit locations. Some of them will do reruns annually, some of them every other year, and then some of them don't even rerun them until every 3 years. I would never recommend waiting that long. I know my son's school, they sent out an email a couple months ago about volunteers and how they rerun them every 5 years. And they got a lot back from me about that. I could not fathom 5 years. Do you know how much someone can do in 5 years? So reruns, extremely important. Now it's really just going to fall on your judgment and how often you want to do it. I will say that there is a new search that has become available, and it's monthly monitoring. We don't offer it at this time, but we are looking to implement it because it is a very important feature. And what that monthly monitoring would do is, if after you hire someone, their name will go into this database where we will constantly monitor their name and their information. If they're arrested, if they have a new conviction, anything like that, after the date that we originally ran them, you will be notified that something is going on. So there are too many cases where people don't do reruns, run them the first time and then never care again. And then they're facing crazy situations. I've heard very many different things. I'm not going to get into detail about them, but reruns are important. Very, very, very important. Especially, I specialize in in-home healthcare and nonprofit organizations. So for me, it's dealing with elderly, dealing with children, disabilities. So it's easy to get passionate behind that, helping these people realize they need to protect the people that they're trying to help. We can get into very dark scenarios there. I mean, I'm sure all of you guys know there's some crazy people in this world. So if you're going to ask me, I will always say, do annual reruns, not every 2 years, not every 3 years, do annual. And then as soon as monthly monitoring is something that you can even get, I recommend doing that as well. And it's very cost efficient. It's not super expensive, and you can even do it month by month or however you want to do it. I know turnover rate is going to vary with everyone as well. So this graph is going to show you how many people are locked up in the United States, which is really a crazy amount of people. And with what DeeAnn said earlier, we can circle around 3 times with the people who've been in prison or in jail. I mean, think about that. Think about how big the world is. That's just astronomical. So 2.3 million people are currently incarcerated right now. 3.7 million people are on probation. So that means they've been incarcerated. 636,000 people are released from prisons each year, and 11 million people cycle through jails each year. So the thing is where it shows the local jails, how you can see where it's not convicted and convicted, the non-convicted portion is a lot bigger than the convicted portion. A lot of people get arrested. The convictions, though, is where it matters. You can get arrested all the time, but if you're never convicted, we can't report that. It's illegal. So you can see how many people are in state prisons, and then it even breaks down. I'm hoping all you guys can see that well enough. The graphs, I'm hoping. The state prisons, you can see the 4 main categories there are violence, property, drug, and public order. And then the federal, as I was telling you guys earlier, it's really a small portion compared to the state prosecuted level. So I'm going to reiterate, normally people with federal convictions have convictions at the state level as well, but I don't have any numbers on that. There could be quite a few numbers in there where they don't have a state conviction. So running federals is still important to do. I don't want you guys to take that as, okay, so we don't need to do it. It's still very important. Okay, DeeAnn.
Okay. And we have a pop quiz, our last pop quiz question. Last chance to win these awesome headphones. You've already heard and seen the answer. So this one is truly a pop quiz. What is the #1 reason people are locked up in state prisons? Is it A, drug possession, B, public order, which includes DUIs, weapons, and other public disorder? C, property damage from burglary, theft, fraud, or auto theft? Or is it D, violent crime, which is murder, robbery, rape, and sexual assault, and manslaughter? So go ahead and enter in your answer now. And the answer is D, violent crime, which again kind of goes back to that, murder, robbery, the kind of the big things, the big ones. Now, if you answered any of those questions at all, if you even attempted, if you got any of them right, any of that, if you would put in your name and your address, and I will mail you out these today and tomorrow to get those out to you. So if you would just put in your name and your address, then I would love to send you just a little gift for participating today.
Okay, so in conclusion, again, the background screening process is constantly changing, proving difficult to get the full picture of your applicant's history. There's never going to be a perfect search, you guys, ever. You can spend $2,000 on one search and you're still going to miss information. Unfortunately, that's just how it works. But obtaining the knowledge specific to your area is going to give you the tools necessary to perform a cost-efficient search and know that you're doing your due diligence and getting the picture that you need. Address history is absolutely key in running a successful background check. The address history is their trail. That's how you're going to know what counties to search, what states they've lived in. That's how you check their background. Knowing the right questions to ask when speaking to any kind of background screening providers. I'm going to say again, when I first started this, I was very shocked with how little people really understood what the nationwide meant. So if you take anything away from me today, never run a nationwide search on its own. Always pair it with at least a county of residence. I will speak those words until the day I die, even if I'm not working for a background screening company. It's very important. And again, with how complex the field is, it can get confusing quick. So just knowing your area, knowing how to run the searches in your area is key. And you're always going to get what you pay for. So how to set up an account? With us, it's fairly easy. And I'm pretty sure it's probably the same with any consumer reporting agency. Everything with us is online through databases. So it's just obtaining the information needed to get you set up. We do have widgets and quick app links, which is basically sending links to your applicants. So even if you do Zoom interviews and you want to run their background check, you can just send them a link. I know a lot of people offer things like that. And then it's all done online and, social distancing approved.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy. Our accounts are free. There's no contracts with us or anything like that. It's a pay-as-you-go system.
The only thing I might just interject here, and I don't think we have a slide for, I know a lot of people look at CaseNet, and I think Jackson County, especially having that access to that is fantastic. However, understanding kind of the legal ramifications, if you are an employer or an organization or a church, knowing that you need to make decisions based on that, that might not be truly accurate information. And that's why whether you used us, we would always recommend that you do actually use a CRA. Now there's, accreditations and things like that. But just using that consumer reporting agency to make that decision. Otherwise, we are seeing kind of, the risk for a business not running a background check is that you can get that employee that makes a bad decision and costs you your company or your reputation. Mm-hmm. But, on the flip side of it, if you are a business and you decide not to hire somebody because you looked them up on CaseNet and you saw that they had been arrested 4 times and you used that information to make a decision, you could actually be sued because that is not truly their consumer reporting kind of information and that not their true background check. So, Khali, I don't know if you...
There has been a surplus of websites. I know I've talked to many people who are just logging onto these websites, paying like $5 to do a screening. On every single one of those websites at the very bottom, it will always say you cannot use this information to make employment decisions. So always be cautious of that as well.
Yes.
Normally, if it seems too good to be true, it is.
It is.
What about the, so I hired my new guy this week, right? And we did the background check and it came back fine. And then I just decided to do the background check again on all my employees and something pops up. Do I have to have their, do I have to run it by them that I'm running another background check on my staff? And 2, if it pops up a year later because, it wasn't on record, and now he's a pedophile, can I fire him with that? And I don't know if that's more of an HR question or.
Now with the disclosure and authorization forms, standardly they're good for a year. If there's no specific verbiage in there, it should be good for employment, their whole time employed for you. However, I would just cover yourself, and if you know you're going to do annual reruns, just put that in your disclosure and authorization form. That way you're just covered. There's no gray area there. And then as far as having the right to fire them, if something has come up, let's say they got arrested yesterday and you hired him today, but he's not convicted yet, so it wouldn't show up. So it shows up when you do the annual rerun, absolutely fire him. Absolutely. And we do offer, and I'm sure all companies do, pre-adverse and adverse action letters. So you're even covered there. Just supply them with that.
That's perfect. And because this is very confusing, every state does it different. Every county does it different. It's literally you're dealing with, I don't know, we kind of say about 3,400 different entities in the United States alone. Whenever you do have questions, Khali and I, and again, we also have other experts at Datasource as well. But we have the resources for you. So it's as easy as picking up the phone, and we like to do it very, maybe customized might be the right word, to find out, okay, you know, like Laura, what specifically are you, you know what I mean, are you doing in kind of more of a case by case basis. So Khali and I are both, you know, more than willing to have any conversations that you need to answer questions and to learn more. Like I said, I think everyone at Datasource truly loves what we do, and it's not just our job, it's our mission. And we have this passion to make sense of all of these different rules, but really have the greater good behind all of that in protecting those who especially can't protect themselves.
Absolutely.